Another month, another good old video about unused Spider-Man stuff. My favorite. I think it's no secret that Spider-Man movies are the most popular piece of media that the character appears in. Like, come on, Spider-Man 1? You've seen it, your mom's seen it, your grandma's seen it, everyone knows Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. The same can be said for the other movie Spider-Man, mainly Tom Holland. The majority of the common folk have seen Spider-Man No Way Home, and some of them will try to brainwash you into thinking it's the best movie ever. But that's not what we're here to talk about. My point is that everybody knows everything about the Spider-Man movies. But actually, you don't. Because there are actually a number of Spidey films that didn't make it past the conceptual stage. Some even had full-blown scripts. The first of which is Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4. Believe it or not, there were actually plans for a Spider-Man 5 and 6, but very little is known about either of those. Sam Raimi and his team were all pretty disappointed after Spider-Man 3 suffered from heavy studio interference. It simply wasn't the movie they wanted to make. So Sam wanted a big focus on quality this time around to end the trilogy on a higher note. The movie would focus on Spider-Man fighting the Vulture, who's going to be a much bigger threat this time around than he usually is. The Lizard could have also appeared, as well as Felicia Hardy, who would have been the Vulture's daughter. The movie was set to release in 2011. There are also these amazing storyboards by Jeffrey Henderson. These are our best look at what the shots in the film could have been like. There's a few of Spidey pulling off some nice poses, as well as Vulture stabbing him through the shoulder. Yikes. There isn't really much known about the movie besides these small plot details, but I do know that fans have been begging for this version of the character to make a return in the form of Spider-Man 4. He did finally come back in No Way Home, but for some that wasn't really enough. But I know the burning question on your mind is, what do I think? Well, I don't think we need a Spider-Man 4.
Move this man!
Would it be cool? Hell yeah. Would it sell a ton of tickets? Absolutely. But those movies are so defined by their time that I feel like it would be walking on sacred ground to try to keep it going. Not everything needs another sequel, you know? I'm not against the idea, but part of me is okay with that version of the character being left in the past instead of trying to retread something that already was working. Who knows, Sony might try to milk it and that would ruin the legacy. I don't really want that, but of course this movie never came to be, despite all the hype surrounding it. The next movie on our list is one that in my opinion is a lot more interesting. This is James Cameron's very own Spider-Man movie. That's right, the James Cameron. The guy responsible for these guys. Anyway, this would have been way before Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movie, so this idea is pretty ancient. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad we didn't get it. Let me explain. James Cameron's Spider-Man would have been a much darker and more realistic take on Spider-Man, with a realistic costume, organic webs, and a very grounded story. A lot of storyboard sketches were created for this movie by the amazing Danielle Tomasi. These are awesome, and without them, this would be much more painful to visualize. This movie is going to have a pretty cool take on Spider-Man's origin, with a bigger emphasis on the fame that would come with being Spider-Man, or how much Peter would have to adapt to his powers. We would see him sneaking out at night to go leap around buildings, or even to torture Flash. Well, his name was actually Nathan, but he was literally just Flash Thompson. This happens quite a lot, actually. In this movie, there will be characters that resemble their comic counterparts, but just have a completely different name for some reason. Like the antagonist, Carlton Strand, who's basically Electro, but if he was a millionaire and took advantage of everyone in his life. He's definitely a more realistic take on Electro, I guess, but it's just very boring. He would try to bribe Spider-Man by telling him how rich he would get if he joined his side, but of course, Spider-Man refuses and they become enemies. Spider-Man is pretty cool in this movie, even if he does a lot of weird things that are out of character, like stalking Mary Jane. You freak. Anyway, I really like the way Danielle interprets the costume in this movie. It looks really nice and the spider emblems are gorgeous. I'd love to make this suit one day. Let me know if you guys would like to see that. And while you're at it, go check out some of my other cosplay videos too. I find it pretty interesting that they plan to cast Leonardo DiCaprio as Spidey. I could never in a million years visualize that, but it would have been pretty cool. But of course, the movie was never released. In fact, it didn't really get very far. The cost wasn't really favorable at the time for a darker and grittier Spider-Man movie. You gotta remember, this was way before Spidey was a theatrical hit, so the studios were trying to play it more safe. Cameron's idea would have been cool, but an R-rated Spider-Man movie was very risky at the time. Eventually, Marvel's financial troubles resulted in the rights ending up with Sony, but at that point the project was no longer being considered. Some things from his pitch lived on in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, like the organic webs. But to this day, his movie remains a neat idea, and some would have really liked it, but I'm kinda glad it didn't happen. But yeah, I think we're doing just fine in the reality where an R-rated Spider-Man movie didn't happen. It was definitely an interesting take on the origin, but I'm much happier with the movies that followed. Now it's time to take a look at what's undeniably the most wanted Spider-Man movie ever. Even more than Spider-Man 4, and that's The Amazing Spider-Man 3. A lot of fans, including myself, were super disappointed that Andrew didn't get his time to shine after TRZsum 2's flop. TRZsum 3 could have been the movie to show us Peter's dark side, with a lot of fans speculating that the alien costume would play a big role. The story would have revolved around Peter dealing with guilt after Gwen's death, and the consequences of going too far. When Andrew in No Way Home said he stopped pulling his punches, he meant it. Apparently, Peter would be trying to work on a formula to bring Gwen back to life. Okay. He would have met Mary Jane in a therapy group, who would become a major character in the film. She actually was planned to appear at the end of TRZsum 2. There were even scenes with her filmed, but of course they were all cut from the movie. The Sinister Six was also in talks for the film, with Norman Osborn coming back to life. Very, very little is known for sure about this movie, and that's because it never really got past the planning stage. There wasn't even a script for it. The emotionally complicated story would have been cool to see, and I would have really liked to see Peter deal with Gwen's passing in a way that felt true to Andrew's version of Spider-Man. I remember after No Way Home, there was a huge influx of Andrew fans suddenly coming back, and Andrew was just like,
"Bro, where were you guys?"
It's true though, had all these people liked Andrew's movies when they were actually coming out, maybe that fan response would have been enough to see this movie get off the ground. As for me, I was always a huge fan of Andrew's movies. He was great in No Way Home, but TRZsum 1 will always be one of my favorite movies of all time. Is he perfect? No, but I do like him better than the other two. After No Way Home, people were begging for TRZsum 3, but of course, it didn't happen. Sony ended up with a big risk on their hands, and they chose to play it safe and just have a new Spider-Man into the MCU instead. Their priorities were heavily shifted, and instead of moving forward with Andrew, they decided to reset the character with Tom Holland. This meant dropping all the plans for TRZsum 3. Or at least, the little that they had. Like I said earlier, No Way Home caused fan reactions to explode, and now everybody wanted Andrew to get a new movie, starting the hashtag #MakeTRZsum3. It's not as strong as it was years ago, but there are countless fan projects out there trying to make what could have been. Countless fans begging, and I believe at one point there was like a GoFundMe or something like that. The demand for this movie is insanely high, but of course Sony just ignored it. This is probably the only movie on this list that I would really like to be made today, but I would be very concerned about Sony's interference. They ruined a big part of TRZsum 2, and I don't really trust them enough to handle my precious child, The Amazing Spider-Man, anymore. Honestly, I think all these movies were cancelled for pretty valid reasons. I'm glad some of them didn't come to be, like James Cameron's Spider-Man pitch, but I do find myself wondering what The Amazing Spider-Man 3 would have looked like. But what do you think? Would you like to see any of these, or are you more content knowing they didn't release? Or maybe you have some ideas of how you would handle these films? Let me know in the comments. I read and respond to every comment I get. Feel free to test me right now. Anyway, plug time. My book, The Ace of Spades, has been out for a while, and according to those who got it, it's pretty awesome. My second book, The Ace of Spades and the Sword of Serenity, is dropping this winter, and the pre-release content for this one is going to go pretty crazy, so subscribe if you want to see that. Thanks for watching, my friends, and I will see you guys next week. God bless.